American service members are once again dying in Donald Trump's war on Iran. The latest deaths are the first in this war since March. And yesterday, when Donald Trump was asked about those deaths and Iran bailing on a ceasefire that he had been bragging about for weeks, calling his memorandum of understanding the greatest deal in history, something to bring peace to the Middle East. When asked about it falling apart, the pedo-in-chief said what? He said, and I quote, "I couldn't care less." And of course, he said it where he always is when Americans are dying for him, on a golf course, doing his idiotic little wave, his little dance for the cameras, because none of this is real to Donald Trump. While he's out there working on his putting in a trip paid for by the taxpayers, you can't drink the water. Why? Because it's being used to cool off data centers. You can't afford beef. Why? Because it's filled with flesh-eating parasites. It's also too expensive. You can't get lettuce either for a salad. No, you'll poop your brains out under Donald Trump with the produce. And the air outside, if you want to do anything with your day, it's now poison and fire. Every single thing that keeps you alive has gotten either more dangerous or more expensive under Donald Trump's watch. And this is the guy who's supposed to be fixing things. He just told us he couldn't care less. But here's some good news. Donald Trump is just as sick as he's making us. In every new appearance, his hands are more bruised and rotting. His speech is slurred and scarily full of slurs, and every day another doctor or elected official comes out for the 25th Amendment because everybody can see that he's lost his mind and it's not coming back. So here's where we stand. Lindsey Graham is in hell, Mitch McConnell is in purgatory, and Trump is terrified about his future and, of course, the midterms, if he even makes it there. He's so terrified, in fact, that he had Carolyn Leavitt cancel press access yesterday, shutting down the White House and calling a lid. Why? Because they're terrified of questions, really scary questions like, why are we in this war? Seems reasonable. Here's another one they're terrified of. What's the plan? And why is Pete Hegseth pushing a steroid program on American troops so they can get more jacked while they lose wars? Seriously, Hegseth's latest announcement is that soldiers with low T will get gender-affirming care from the government via regular testosterone injections. With so much more chaos in such a short period of time, it's no surprise that Donald Trump wants to avoid the press. It's also no surprise that Donald Trump, seeing his administration falling apart, is very worried about the midterms and doing everything he can to stop them. That is why Donald Trump stood up Thursday night, although he could really barely stand, with his own intelligence chiefs behind him to announce some important and relevant topical news that Americans really care about. That he's talking about the 2020 election again. Still, 6 years later, telling the country China rigged it, and that he had documents to prove it, which not only did not prove it, but his own agencies, his own hand-picked acolytes, put out files that said, nothing's here. No votes changed, no machines hacked, the exact same conclusion that the intelligence community had already reached 5 years ago. He's just rehashing old bullshit that nobody cares about except for him. He knows his most fervent supporters, though, won't read past the headlines or really even read the headline because I don't think they can actually do that. Maybe if it's in a Truth Social post, they'll try to sound it out. Through all of this, though, the war, the dead Americans, the fake election claims, he's grifting more than $2 billion in just the first year, mostly in crypto scams, as we know. More than triple what he had made the year before. Donald Trump is ripping off the presidency for billions. And when reporters put that number in front of him, he shrugged and said, everybody's profiting. That was a real quote. Everybody's profiting, says the scammer in chief. Well, you're rationing beef and boiling lettuce to make sure it doesn't, do what lettuce is doing lately. Donald Trump has found a way to make some money. That's what the presidency is about for him. That's where we are. A president who can't fake caring about the war he started, who's still relitigating an election he lost using paperwork that proves he lost, and who's getting richer off the presidency in real time via the golf course and on the golf course, while the rest of us, the rest of the country, we pay for all of those things at once. And that is why we need a real and strong independent media to call out Donald Trump when CBS won't, when CNN won't, We know that the Fox propaganda outlet won't as well, but we are going to on this show. And that is why I am so glad I have three great guests who are going to be doing that with me. We're going to be starting out with the top brass here at the MeidasTouch Network, and a friend of mine, Ben Meiselas, really interested in what he's going to have to say about, Donald Trump's mental stuff, to say the least. I'm also going to be joined by Congresswoman Sarah McBride, who has been traveling not just across her state, but across the country. And we have got a lot to talk about, especially as it relates to Donald Trump's newly public bisexuality. I will also be joined by another friend of the show and friend of mine, Aaron Parnas, the guy breaking all the news. And we've got a lot of news to break down. And we're going to do it as we always do. Today, it's me, it's you, and it's all happening right now on Sunday. Ben Meiselas, thank you so much for joining me on Sunday.
Jack, good to be here.
We got a lot of breaking news to get into, but none is going to be as enjoyable as talking about a big announcement that you and the brothers came out with this weekend. A new book out from MeidasTouch. Can we get a rundown of what this book is about and why you chose to write a book right now during a time in which we really need some more voices that aren't the mainstream media writing books? I'll say that much.
Well, look, it's the first book that we've ever written together or even alone. It's called WTF America, The Way Out of This Hell and Back to Democracy. And I just think that when we all wake up right now every day, it's kind of what we say, WTF. I mean, there's nothing normal about this moment. And I think that there are a lot of books out there purporting to have secret inside knowledge or withheld knowledge. And I just think the American people want to know, what can we do together? How can we challenge our people power? We appreciate, and we do, look, a lot of the great reporting and the good sourcing out there, but so much of the corruption, so much of the criminality, so much of the cover-ups, it's all happening right before our eyes. Like, we can see it, we know it's there, and people try to normalize it and make it seem like, this is politics and Democrats and Republicans and independents and everybody's, and it's like, we know that guy in the Oval Office did 21,000 stock trades in the first year of his presidency alone, made billions of dollars on that, quid pro quo deals, meme coins, deals with Middle East nations, covered up the Epstein files, continues to cover up the Epstein files, sent ICE and Border Patrol, Gestapo to invade and terrorize our communities. And I could keep on going on. And I think we need to situate the framework and just say, WTF, this isn't normal. And that's got to be kind of a rallying call in general. So it's, how do we get here? How'd me and my brothers start the MeidasTouch Network? Hint, hint, it has a lot to do with this audience that's watching this, that watches you, the Meidas Mighty, people power coming together, and how do we get out of this together? And how do we change this dynamic, not just for an election cycle? It's not an election book of, hey, this is what's happening. We respond to the daily news, of course, and we respond to what's happening. But how do we get out of this generationally, where you have people who break it, then people try to fix it, and the people who try to fix it get the blame for the people who try to break it. And then it's a constant cycle of that over and over and over again. And the American people are the ones who are suffering. And it has a broader view than just the American people. Meidas Canada, Meidas Australia, Meidas Europe, Mexico, Central America, South America, Africa. We have supporters across the world. How do we as citizens of the world kind of come together and push back against this right-wing fascist movement? Because it's not simply a story about Trump. Trump's the vessel in the U.S. laundering this. But as we talk about, you have the Pierre Poilievres in Canada. You've got the right-wing ultra-nationalist parties in France and Germany. You had Timu MAGA in Australia that was poised to win, except for Trump reflecting the same way he did in Canada, what a disaster that would be. And so we talk about it, the history of the world. Human history has been a history of authoritarian, malignant, narcissistic, strong men, usually men, who make destructive and horrible decisions with horrible things happening. The arc of democracy and the swing of human history is small. It's an experiment that certainly is far from perfect, but one that we should try to make more perfect. And so, without revealing the whole book, that there's these broader themes at play, and I hope that it's call to action, philosophical, reflective, and dedicated, of course, to our audience.
Well, you talk about that specific theme of the systems versus the individuals, which I think has become a lot more relevant during the Trump era, or at least we've talked about it more. I want to discuss that in the context a little bit of the news of today, but I just want to, as a journalist, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't ask the simple question of, so this book is not going to be about whether or not Joe Biden wore tennis shoes during his presidency. This is not a Jake Tapper book. This is not that. I just got to make sure.
It's not that. And it more broadly argues that the gamification of politics is deeply toxic. And there is a distinction between calling out the fascism and calling out the bad behavior, which is what we should do, versus treating everything as just a horse race and a exaltation of this personality versus that personality. It should truly be about, what are we trying to do here? I mean, we always have to stake, but what are we trying to accomplish? What's the very purpose of government and governance? What does it mean to be a public servant? Why should we elect people to these positions? We don't want to be non-consensual participants in dystopian reality shows with fake, fraud, phony, dangerous plot lines. We want to be empowered to just pass to our future generations a better world, and live in a better world today, and be better citizens of the country, but of the world as global citizens, just trying to make this earth a better place. We're here for, not to be all, morbid. We're not here for that, but it's beautiful as well. We're not here for that long. And I argue that we should utilize it to uplift and help and to make people happier, not beat down, not go to war, not harm marginalized communities, and just to make a better place. Like it's sometimes it's that simple, although it's certainly hard to get there.
Yeah, it's complicated by the people who want the opposite. I think community is the thing that escapes us in every part of our politics right now. You have the tech oligarchs who are talking very specifically and for some reason publicly, which I don't get, about how sleep is the enemy and they want more waking hours of our eyes for data. They want more surveillance over us. They want to make everything a subscription model, in your day-to-day life. They're pricing people out of everything, and it removes the aspect of community that I think people have really found with MeidasTouch and the Meidas Mighty, and that is because there was the baseline of the ethos of, we're going to give people the news straight, we're not going to both sides this, we're going to be honest, and we're going to call things what they are. That is certainly something that we've seen the media fail at in the Trump era, especially, I think, with Donald Trump's war on Iran. And that's kind of a long-winded way to get to this problem that I have with the acceptance of everything that Donald Trump does or says, right? The media has become stenographers for him. And as his memorandum of understanding and ceasefire with Iran is blown up, it makes you kind of reflect back on everyone saying, oh, Donald Trump has gotten peace, or a deal is coming, or Trump has said this about a deal. What is it that you think has been the media's biggest failure in kind of prosecuting the case of Donald Trump's war, as it seems to be restarting and killing Americans once again?
The media has ceded its role as the fourth estate, as a lens into the objective reality, and they have fought for access. And in fighting for access and who's going to call Donald Trump first and get his message of Donald Trump said this and Donald Trump said that. And they believe that that's actually helpful to their ratings. It's dangerous. It's lazy. And I also argue it's actually not helpful to their ratings. If it was, then you would see their ratings skyrocketing, and you would see people
we wouldn't
like
be
us,
here.
You wouldn't be here. And
doing better than them, I might point out.
Which is why, though, when you go to a Fight the Oligarchy rally, or when you go to a town hall and you listen and you hear what people are actually saying, you realize that, whether it's this catastrophic war in Iran, which no one wants to, other than neocon war hawks, no one really wants to be in this catastrophic and unlawful war, whether it's data centers, whether it is common sense gun control, whether it is equal rights, whether it's climate and environment. Most issues actually are 80-20 issues where Americans agree on a lot of things. So the question is how do you take an 80-20 America where most Americans want normalcy? They don't want the drama. They want a system of healthcare that works, and I argue that should be free and single payer. But certainly everybody wants it to be cheaper. I don't think that's a disputed fact. I want it to be free for everyone. I want education to be a free, human right for everybody. So how do we all of a sudden have all this agreement and then we have division? And it is all of these culture war issues that are laundered through the media, that are laundered through corporate news, or that are just laundered through these algorithms to divide people into culture war camps versus where we are ultimately united. And so, look, when it comes to this war, I think most people just want to know the truth and what's really happening. What does the memorandum of understanding what did it actually say? And too frequently, what you'll see, and this is why I don't like going on corporate news, is they'll talk about it for 30 seconds, 45 seconds, then they'll split screen, and then they'll fight. And then they'll have this person says this, and this person yells at this person, and everybody's yelling at each other, and then they go to a commercial break. And I'm not sure what that accomplished. That's why what you do, what I do, what the enterprise reporters on the MeidasTouch network do is I sit there and I read the memorandum of understanding. And when you read the memorandum of understanding, you will realize that it required the United States to go through and prove that it would do a number of things before it unlocked what's referred to as the nuclear file, which expressly says Iran won't even address the issues that were fully addressed in the JCPOA until the United States does X, Y, Z, ensures a permanent ceasefire in Lebanon, released $12 billion or so in frozen assets through Qatar, help facilitate a $300 billion fund to Iran, which immediately the U.S. we're not going to do that. I'm like, okay, well, if you don't want to do that, then don't put it in the memorandum of understanding. No. If you don't want it, no one forced you to do this document, other than the fact that, as Trump admitted, we were about to hit tank bottom, which we are right now, in our strategic petroleum reserves, that the U.S. ran out of options at the time. And Trump, in typical Trump fashion, believed, I'm going to lure the other side into this idea of an MOU so we can rearm, try to get some ships out, manipulate the markets. And then we could always go back to war. We'll open up a route, in the southern area of Oman. And then we'll say, well, that's our route. Gotcha. And so why would Iran give up the control of the Strait of Hormuz in the MOU when it says that Iran is the administrator, of it, along with Oman and other areas? And so immediately after the MOU was entered, Marco Rubio takes a trip to the Middle East, and he starts saying things that undermine the MOU. It was just obvious that he read the MOU. What Rubio was doing was saying the exact opposite. And then it was clear to me and you and others that the U.S. is not going to ever, this is not going to follow this at this MOU. And, then we, got to this position and they're out there saying, back in March, what was Trump saying? Iran is obliterated. We destroyed their radar. We destroyed their military. We destroyed everything. They don't exist. And it's just like, that's false. That's a false statement. I don't want to hear the other side of someone saying that because it's not true. I want the news to say that's not true. Iran has its ballistic missiles. They have its Shahed drones. They have these capabilities. Look at the crowd size at the Ayatollah's funeral. We have to deal with the reality to address the reality, and corporate news doesn't want to do it.
And in that way, Trump has kind of sometimes made our job really easy, because I've said this a million times. If from the beginning of the administration, anytime they had said anything, you had just largely gone, don't really believe it. I don't think that's true. This isn't going to work out. You'd be batting at like a 99.9% clip, right? If you just said, this will be bad, this will go poorly, or you are lying. The only good thing that has come out of this administration was the anti-AI revenge porn bill that kind of Melania claimed that was an AOC project that Donald Trump violated with an ad he ran against Thomas Massie. So not even that worked out. But you can just kind of always bet against this stuff, and you're largely going to be right. But it also means that you're largely going to be driven insane by every day having to combat the fact that this is not the narrative being pushed by the mainstream media. I read the comments on Meidas videos. I read the comments on my videos. A lot of our viewers that are watching now and maybe commenting this right now, I've seen them a lot of times say, how do y'all put out 9,000 videos a day and not go crazy? What has been keeping you somewhat sane as you've tried to navigate the past, of course, couple of months, but also years of all of this?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to WTF America, and one of the first page I dedicated to the Meidas Mighty, the community here. And I don't view what I'm doing as a job. I mean, I view it as an obligation. And you may hear my daughter crying in the background, because I view this, though, and I do it intentionally. I can get a studio somewhere else where you don't hear my daughter crying, or you don't hear my dogs barking, or you don't hear an occasional fly that somehow gets in the heat of the summer. But that's real. That's who I am. I'm in the trenches with everybody going through this and experiencing this. I get scared. I get happy. I get sad. I get angry, but I feel that I've been fortunate enough to have a career that prepared me to meet this moment, having been a civil litigator who did a lot of high-profile trials and was in some of the kind of biggest mediations, at the and litigations during certain periods of time. And that it's prepared me to be able to address, this moment. And so I think what would actually make me crazy is if I didn't do this, if I wasn't doing this and I watched it happen and I knew I had the ability to at least offer help and guidance and suggestions and the shared outrage. I think that's actually what would drive me crazy. Doing this every day is a privilege. And I hope one day, and I do feel one day, we can get out of this cycle, and the types of reporting that we can do hopefully can focus on more substantively how we can solve this problem and have a true debate on the different types of reforms and ways to go about making things better. But right now there's an existential threat of destroying our democracy, of destroying our country, of destroying the world. And that's not hyperbolic. And, I think it's when people go, oh, well, that's hyperbolic, or it's not that bad. And it's like, no, it is. We have to understand the moment, and we have to fight. And, and that's the message that we put out here on the MeidasTouch Network.
And you've built a platform for so many to do it. I was just talking about the work that Katie Fang has done with y'all right now, and making sure that the media isn't just talking about the Epstein files, but actually has access to the Epstein files. I feel like that is a story that was driven so much by independent media, putting pressure, talking about the relevance, bringing in the actual stories, covering it daily. And, there are a lot of times when you and I are, or just all of us in this independent space, kind of theorizing about what we think is going to happen, but it gives us the ability to ask questions that the mainstream media maybe wouldn't have before, out of respect or the fear that Trump would come down on them. But we see that differently. We see it as a badge of honor when anyone in the administration goes after us, which y'all have plenty of times. And I'm sure they're going to go after you for the book. Could you plug it one more time and tell people where to find it?
Yeah, WTF America, pre-order it right now. It's climbing the charts. It comes out in October, but do the pre-order now, because if you pre-order now, it really helps with the momentum of the book. And I'll leave with this. What makes this job, this community, this everything just so special and not a job at all is working with people like you, Jack, working with Katie Fang, working with Scott McFarlane, working with, Michael Popak at Legal AF, and Karen Friedman-Agnifilo, who's, the top lawyer. Just think about it, like the top lawyer in the country right now, representing every high profile case. She's a commentator, Katie Fang fighting the way. Allison Gill, whose show is also on Sundays. She's out there with her sources doing incredible.
We got Aaron on later in the show.
Requests.
Give him a plug as well.
I mean, you got Aaron. I mean, Aaron's the biggest superstar out there, right now. And, for me, it is, how can I help great people do great things? And how can, what support, if any, can we give to help just entrepreneurial, great, motivated people build platforms that make a difference and help. And so that's the real honor of this for me, and the growth of the MeidasTouch Network, and what we have in store for the future as we see your platform, Jack, as we see this show crush it, and and so many other incredible people here sharing their viewpoints.
We've got a lot more in store, a lot more in the future. I say it at the end of every episode. I always thank you and the brothers, but I got to say it again, and I got to plug the book as well. But y'all have given me a great platform, given a lot of folks a great platform, and I really appreciate you joining me. As always on Sunday, Ben, thank you so much.
Great to be here on Sunday and any day you need me.
Always fantastic speaking to Mr. MeidasTouch himself, Ben Meiselas. Always great conversation. And Ben is really holding it down for independent media, really the godfather of independent media. That's not an old comment, Ben. I know I'm not going to say that, especially on your network, so don't worry, but just always building so much, always doing so much. And we are so lucky to have him, because we need independent media right now. We need voices willing to cut through the bullshit. And that is exactly what I'm about to do with new friend of the show, Congresswoman Sarah McBride. I hope you enjoy. Congresswoman Sarah McBride, thank you so much for joining me on Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, and I'm sorry that I'm starting you off on a bad note here, but we got to talk about the biggest news of the week, which was a bit of a snooze fest, and we were actually just kind of talking about that off camera. Donald Trump's big speech Thursday night. Of course, threat to democracy. This is a man engaged in authoritarian takeover, but just kind of sick and kind of sad. And you had that takeaway on Twitter. You wrote, "My heart goes out to Donald Trump. He's truly just a shell of his former self. He could once talk without suffocating at the same time." Sad to see. Was that your biggest takeaway?
Well, as we were talking about, it was hard to watch. It was hard to watch, obviously, for the point that you mentioned, which is that he is once again engaging in a deranged conspiratorial rant that makes zero sense to anyone but himself and maybe the dredges of the MAGAverse. but it was also incredibly boring and difficult to watch because he's not his old self. He's clearly lost a step or two, and his inability to get through a sentence without both an extreme breath and also appearing to suffocate at the same time was really just like painful to watch.
It was very hoarse. In those first 2 minutes, you could see that he really wanted to get a cough out, but he knew like if he did, it just would have been a disaster that he would have been mocked for. How much are you monitoring from day to day? Because there's a lot of it. And we're at the point where kind of, Trump falling asleep doesn't get the same attention that it did before. But how much are you monitoring his health situation?
Well, I think all of us can't help but notice the very obvious decline of the president. I mean, this coalition on the right spent 4 years picking up every single stutter or pause or moment of sort of slowing down that the previous president had. And they obviously are trying to ignore the very, very real signs of this president, not just slowing down, not just aging, but clearly losing his executive faculties. I think if you step back and look at the totality of the first term of the Trump administration and this term of the Trump administration, I mean, the first term was terrible. He was obviously reined in by some of the people around him. He's now perhaps the sanest person in the room, and in Trump too. But I also think there is no question that we see the loss of his executive function in his decision-making over the last 2 years. I mean, I think Iran is such a clear example of his inability to think critically. He was always incredibly stupid, but he's now both stupid and senile, and the consequences are dangerous for the country. It allows him to be easily led into obviously reckless decisions, including an obviously ill thought out war. And the country is suffering, the world is suffering. And I think everyone is seeing this. And unfortunately, MAGA in Congress and within the administration is afraid to tell the emperor that he has no clothes.
I'm so glad you make the point about the stupidity because, I am constantly talking about Trump's health to the point that I am surprised I'm not on the media offenders list, but we're striving for it. We're going to get there one day.
Get there. Aspirational goals.
We got to have them. How else am I going to get through this life? But you got to connect it back to the fact that there are real implications. And this has been detailed throughout Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan's reporting about how distracted Trump is, how he can't focus. And when you can't focus, you can't engage in negotiations or long-term foreign policy planning. What are the other policy impacts you think of Trump's, I call it dementia is what it seems like, but at least cognitive decline?
Well, I mean, one, I mentioned already the war in Iran, but I think his inability to control his own administration, the fact that whether it be Pete Hegseth or Blanche or any RFK, his inability to rein in the worst crazies within his administration, I think is a clear sign that he's lost it. He's lost his attention span. He's lost his executive function. He is incapable of controlling, even when he knows what they are doing is bad politics or bad policy. I mean, the Republicans passed that healthcare cut over, frankly, his political objections, not substantive objections, over his political objections. I mean, he is a weak leader at this point within his own coalition and within his own administration. And I guess, whether it be RFK, Hegseth, Netanyahu, the list of people who are able to more easily manipulate an already easily manipulated individual is one more sign of the decline of this president. I mean, he was already short of intelligence in the first term, but it's just absolutely obvious now.
As it relates to Netanyahu, of course, we have J.D. Vance saying that he's reporting back to Netanyahu on the daily about information, and Netanyahu said the same thing. Obviously, there was that situation room meeting. What else do you think is at play in terms of the intelligence that his coalition government has that they're using against Trump, or or, maybe some influences of a Larry Ellison or Miriam Adelson or others. What else worries you in that regard with maybe kind of the foreign pressure put on Trump?
Well, I think the entirety of the last 10 years has been a display of manipulation by this president, whether it be by Russia, whether it be by China, whether it be by Netanyahu. The list goes on. He is the most easily manipulated leader. It's why Russia was so eager to have him in office. And, the irony of the speech that he gave last night and the quote unquote declassified documents, which revealed nothing new, no evidence that votes were tampered with. But it also revealed, yes, there have been foreign efforts to influence public opinion in the United States. And that includes, in the very documents that the White House put out, Russia trying to influence the outcome in public opinion in support of Donald Trump in the previous elections. And so I think we've seen this time and time again, whether it's compromat, whether it's information they have on him, whether it's his own stupidity and the fact that he's increasingly senile, or just whether it's the fact that this president only appreciates authoritarians, really looks up to them. We were talking about aspirational goals. I mean, it's clear this president would love nothing more than to be Vladimir Putin shirtless on a horse riding around with his oligarchs. It's why the Oval Office looks like a Belarusian oligarch's living room. This president is obsessed with strongmen and authoritarians. And honestly, I really think a big part of this is his desire to emulate those he's got a crush on.
Yeah, and especially right now as he feels so weak. One of my kind of moments that stuck out to me most in the Trump health saga as it relates to just the feelings of insecurity, as he had the Stanley Cup champions at the White House, and he was doing his thing as he does now, where he expresses his long, hidden bisexuality, and he's hitting on these guys, and he's like, well, quite frankly, sorry, I have to do this. People get upset, but some people like it. Quite frankly, you're such a handsome men and lovely men. And then he goes, but I have the U.S. military. He's like, you're strong, but I have the military. Do you think that's part of this as well? Like, this is a reaction to Trump just becoming, a little floppy, and just in terms of all of the extremities, he's just not there anymore physically. Not that he really was.
Not that he ever was. First of all, your Trump impression is A+.
It's not a good thing. Please don't encourage me. There are too many people who do encourage me, but others do not like it.
It's really good. And the older he gets and the more hoarse his voice gets, the sort of easier it is almost to characterize.
Quite frankly, easier it gets.
It really gets easier. Yes, I mean, look, Donald Trump and his entire administration, it's like a borderline homoerotic Greek or Roman trilogy that we're watching. It's absolutely obvious, and whether it's the glass closets that some people are living in or what, it would be humorous if it wasn't so dangerous, because these insecure people are playing out their masculinity insecurities for the entire country to see. And the irony is I mean, that's part of one of the reasons why they're so obsessed with trans people. It's one of the reasons why they're so obsessed with these sort of performative demonstrations of strength. It is a psychological wonder to watch.
I want to talk more about that masculinity problem with your Republican colleagues. Did you see the Hegseth flyover thing? You're talking about horrible performances of strength. Did you see the videos of the jets like going supersonic across the beach, and chairs are flying up in the air, and there's children covering their ears? Did you see this?
No, I didn't see that, but that is
it is crazy,
not surprising, and I'm sure the secretary got a lot of pleasure from that. I didn't see it.
The flyovers have been insane. I'm DC based, and like every day on July, or on the days leading up to and after July 4th, it was just like booming, horrible noise, and you're like, not only is that annoying, it is also a waste of my tax dollars. So thank you for that. But your Republican colleagues, talk about people who are emasculated. They're going to have to defend and already are what Donald Trump said in his Thursday speech, which is that both Barack Obama and Joe Biden were able to oversee secure elections, but he hasn't? Like, how are they going to even try to make the argument of anything he said being rational?
No, they can't. This speech was a tantrum by the president. He's upset that his own party in the Senate recognizes that the so-called Save America Act is a bag of dumbass ideas. Mm-hmm. And he went on TV to rant about his conspiracy theories in order to try to shame those Republicans into letting it go through or to abolish the filibuster. I mean, they will not be able to pass this. This does not change it. This is just an embarrassing display of the president's decline and a classic example of his conspiratorial rantings. There's nothing new here. I mean, they'll try to bullshit their way into pushing it forward, but it still will not pass. And last night, I bet not only does it not change the status quo, it probably only diminishes the chance of this president being able to push through the Save America Act.
Yeah, I don't know how much you're chopping it up with your Republican colleagues on the day-to-day, but in the lead up to this, what was their worry level like? Did you get that sense? Did you talk to anyone? Was there like a brush past in the hallway and you could kind of get a sense? Where do you think they stand in the fact that they have to defend this and it's becoming, as it has been for a while, increasingly unpopular and political poison?
Look, I think they're getting very nervous. I think they're getting very nervous about this president's unpopularity. I think they're getting very nervous about the upcoming elections. I think they're getting really frustrated with this president's inability to focus on the issues that they want to focus on in order to appear like they are actually addressing the cost of living crisis that people are facing. I mean, they're floundering under the weight of this incredibly unhinged, unwell man. And, I think the frustration was very clear when the president didn't even show up to his own bill signing for the housing bill that passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. It was the one thing. Mm-hmm. It was the one thing that Republicans in Congress thought that they might be able to run on as evidence that they care about the cost of living. And the president completely squandered that opportunity because he's completely consumed with his own insecurities, including the fact that he lost the 2020 election. And there's a lot of frustration among Republicans on that point. Look, they don't actually want to solve the cost of living crisis. They don't care. As long as the rich get their tax breaks and they get to do what Republicans always love doing, which is cutting people's health care, they're happy. But they want to be able to pretend like they care, and the president is consistently making it harder for them to do that.
Yeah, these are people who don't do town halls, who run away from their constituents, who look at polls and scoff. You've done the opposite. I wanted to give you a little shout out for 57 cities and towns in 57 hours was the tour that you just did kicking off re-election. Can you tell me more about how much you slept? How many different spots did you get to eat something? Was it just a blast and a half? You don't have to say if there was a favorite location, but how was that and how are people feeling on the ground?
So, I love Delaware. My friends and I call ourselves Statriots. We are obsessed with this state. It's small but mighty. I traveled in June to all 57 towns and cities in Delaware in 57 hours. I did get to sleep. That was the first question I got from people. I was like, I'm not showing up at a town of 70 people at 2 a.m. in the morning to walk down the street and just shout, asking people to reelect me and maybe get the cops called on me. No, so I traveled across the state during the daytime and visited over 3 days all of those towns and cities. I ate a lot of pizza, a lot of ice cream, and had a lot of coffee. And I can tell you the best either pizza shop, coffee shop, or ice cream parlor in probably every town in Delaware now. Mm-hmm. But the number one thing that I heard from people across the state, and look, I was going from places from Wilmington, our biggest city, which is, deeply blue, to small towns and cities that have 90 people, 100 people, 150 people. And no matter where I was, no matter how big or small the town was, the number one thing I kept hearing from people is that Donald Trump has broken his central promise
Yeah.
to lower the cost of living. And not only has he broken that promise by not focusing on that, he's broken that promise in ways that has made the cost of living crisis worse for people. And I have never seen the public so clearly associate a individual presidential decision with the money in their pocket more so than they connect the president's decision to go to war in Iran with the rising cost of living, the rising cost of gas, and the rising cost of pretty much everything as a byproduct of that.
What was the topic with regards to, the terrible economy that Donald Trump is creating for everybody except those with Trump in their last name? What was the number one concern that came up with regards to the corruption? Right, this is something that is like the through line of everything in the administration. But what did you hear the most with regard to how this family is enriching itself?
I heard a lot, and I continue to hear a lot about the enrichment of the president's family through crypto. I hear a lot about the plane, which predictably is not secure enough for this president to fly through the Middle East. And I hear a lot about how not only the president is benefiting himself and his family while people struggle, but people recognize that he's not making decisions for the public good. He's not making decisions to help everyday people. He's making decisions purely to enrich himself and his friends, and to some degree, his billionaire buddies who he made an unholy alliance with in the last election, which was, you fund my campaign and help facilitate my consolidation of power, and I will pay you off by passing massive tax breaks. And so people very much see the crony capitalism and the self-dealing and corruption that has been a through line of this administration from day one, and infuses essentially every single decision that he has made and that his administration has made.
And it's the message to run on. And there are so many, of course, your reelection effort, although it's important, may look a little different than some of the other Democrats out there who are trying to flip seats right now, or the competitive primaries that we have out there. There has certainly been a revolution in the Democratic Party over the past year and couple of months. What have been your biggest takeaways, or what do you think the biggest lesson that Democrats need to learn about kind of this new movement, whether it be, more progressive candidates, DSA, or just people who are talking about the fight and taking it to Donald Trump in a different way? You're part of a new generation of leaders. What do you think the biggest lesson to be learned is right now? And what does the Democratic Party need to be doing differently going into November?
So I believe that in order for us to win, we have to do a better job at building coalitions. But in order for us to build coalitions, we have to build trust first. And I think people are desperate for candidates and elected officials who, whether they agree with them on every issue or not, and it's very rare to find a candidate that you agree with on every issue, but whether a voter, whether it be a Democratic primary voter or even an independent voter, or hell, a Republican who is dismayed at what they're seeing, what they are so desperately looking for right now are people that they can trust. People who are willing to say hard truths, people who are willing to stand up to special interests, people who are willing to say what maybe we determined was unsayable 10 or 15 years ago. People want that. And unfortunately, Donald Trump gave it to them in some ways by saying things that many thought were offensive and are offensive, but actually built trust. We have to say things that are clear, that are courageous, and that are truthful, unlike this president. And I think we have to be willing to recognize that we can stay true to what we believe and build coalitions at the same time. In fact, that is the way to build a coalition. It is through trust and through elected officials, candidates, and a party saying, regardless of whether you agree with me on this, regardless of whether this is what the donor class wants, I'm going to say and I'm going to vote my conscience. The second thing I would say is I think across all of the candidates that have won over the last year and a half, whether they're Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey or Zoran
Who's
Hamdani.
Great. Who's also great.
Absolutely. And they reflect different parts of our coalition, but everyone is doing the same kind of 3P politics that I think we need to embody across this country. The first is obviously a politics of prosperity, a politics that is focused on the cost of living and recognizes that fighting Trump is not simply the beginning and end of the conversation, that if we want to defeat Trumpism, we have to address and fight the causes that have driven Trump to power in the first place. The massive wealth disparity, the fact that people are working harder than ever, and that hard work is not paying off like it used to. They're playing by the rules, and they're not able to achieve the American dream. And so that politics of prosperity, that hyper focus on the day-to-day needs that people have, one. Two, a politics of pluralism, a politics that recognizes that we are a big country with a lot of diversity, and that includes a lot of diversity of not only background, but thought. And that diversity of thought, that coalition building, recognizing that I don't have to believe that you are right on every issue for what you're facing to be wrong, and I don't have to believe that you are right for me to try to right that wrong. That recognition of our commonality, and that through our differences and even our disagreements, we can come together as one people to fight those who are actually trying to destroy our sense of commonality, our Constitution, our union itself. That is how we build the coalition, the diverse working class coalition that we need to win. And then finally, the politics of place, a politics that is rooted in the state or districts that we represent, rooted in our shared identities as Americans, that transcend ideological, partisan, or factional divides that too often result in us fighting one another while the rich get richer.
I think that speaks to coming out of Donald Trump's July 4th disaster, kind of this desire I think the Democrats have, but Americans broadly, to kind of reshape what it means to be patriotic. I think that is what that's speaking to. I love that game plan. I may steal that. I won't articulate it as well, but I'd love to talk about it again when we have you back on the show. I can't take up all your time, but I do really appreciate it, Congresswoman. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Such a great conversation with new friend of the show, Congresswoman Sarah McBride. 57 cities and towns. That is no joke. That is a lot of work to put in. And I can say the same, putting in a lot of work, of our next guest, the man who is literally always breaking news, a longtime friend of mine, and someone I am excited is making his first appearance on Sunday. We're going to be talking about a little bit of Epstein, a little bit of Donald Trump's war, and a little bit of Aaron's eating habits. You're going to want to hear it all. Aaron, let's get into it. Aaron Parnas, thank you for joining me on Sunday.
It's excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. You are the newsmaker, you're the newsbreaker, so I figured it had been long enough since you had been on the show. You've been on the show before, but now you're back on the Sunday show. And we've got a lot of news to get into this week. Obviously, Donald Trump restarting and escalating his war on Iran and costing more American lives has, I don't want to say distracted from the fact, but certainly taken a little bit of the media attention away from the Epstein files, which the media has not covered nearly enough, but you have this week and for the past couple of months. You've spoken to several survivors and specifically those who just met with Todd Blanche this week. What were they feeling about the nature of their meeting? Certainly dismissive, Blanche was, but what was your biggest takeaway from what they've told you?
Yeah, so we heard directly from folks inside the meeting, and the biggest takeaway was the fact that Blanche was condescending, was rude, gaslit the survivors inside the room. I mean, the meeting went for about 90 minutes or so. It was at the Justice Department headquarters. And it seemed as though from the survivors that I spoke to inside the room that it was an attempt by Blanche just to check a box for senators who wanted him to meet with the survivors. Now, there were a couple revealing parts that they told us behind the scenes. The first was that Todd Blanche said, as Attorney General, he can't launch an investigation. He said, quote, "I'm just the Attorney General. I can't investigate anything," and then started waving to the other people in the room, to FBI officials. But remember, the FBI is under the Department of Justice. So that was takeaway number one. And then the second takeaway, which is really being underreported, is Virginia Giuffre's family, Sky and Amanda Roberts, her brother and sister-in-law, were in the room and asked Todd Blanche, how come they're not pursuing investigative leads that Virginia Giuffre told the Justice Department about, specifically as it related to the man formerly known as Prince Andrew. And Todd Blanche responded to them pointedly and said, quote, "Virginia's no longer with us and Andrew won't cooperate, so I can't investigate." I never have heard something like that from a prosecutor. Just because you're target won't cooperate and your victim isn't here with us, doesn't mean you can't pursue an investigative lead. So those are the big two takeaways.
Was there any expectation that it would go in any way but this, that Blanche would maybe engage in good faith? Did anyone that you spoke to have some sort of expectation for him not to just behave like an asshole the whole time?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think that the expectations were on the floor, right?
Uh-huh.
I mean, they were never going to go in there and get everything they wanted. I think the survivors just had hope that he would listen to them and maybe point them to the right direction, and maybe even just come in and say, listen, like, I hear you, I understand you, I will do everything I can to help you. Even if he went in there and lied to them to their faces, that would have been in a way better than what happened here, because it seemed as though he walked into this meeting to just brush them off. It didn't really matter what he said to them. It didn't matter what they said to him. And at the end of the day, no, I mean, the expectations were on the floor and the meeting was even worse than that.
So obviously, you said it earlier, this was just to satisfy Tom Tillis, really, was the Republican senator who said Blanche needed to at least meet with the survivors. From what you heard, are they continuing to put pressure on Tillis, not just for a meeting, but maybe to do something at this point? Because if the meeting was nothing, I know that, Tillis doesn't walk around with much of a backbone, no matter how much that he kind of claims to. Are they still pushing on Republicans who said that this was a box that they needed to check?
100%. Well, I think two things need to happen first. First, I think Tom Tillis needs to sit down with the survivors. Tom Tillis hasn't done that yet. So when Dick Durbin in the committee on the second day said that no one who sits with the survivors would be able to vote for Blanche, I firmly believe that. I think Tillis needs to get in a room and sit with these survivors and needs to hear them to his face. And if he votes for Blanche afterwards, then that's a vote against the survivors. So that needs to happen. And then the second thing needs to happen is John Cornyn needs to get in a room with these survivors. He is the second senator that I have my eyes on, and I know survivors have their eyes on as well. Cornyn, as you know, lost to Paxton, isn't really has nothing to lose. And so so Tillis and Cornyn are really the two right now that all eyes are on, and the pressure really is on them.
It is, and it would be more so if the media was doing its job in covering this story enough. I think your coverage has spotlighted a lot of what has been missed now that the mainstream media has decided to turn its attention to literally anything else. What are the other kind of underlying stories that you think are kind of under-discussed as the attention to the files continues to dwindle?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think the biggest story that's truly under-discussed is the fact it's not... So the way I see the Epstein case and this whole saga and all the files is in two parts. You have the one part, which is you want accountability and people behind bars. That's what everyone focuses on. And a lot of people want the president of the United States held accountable. I get it. There's a lot more people than just the president in those files. So let's focus on a lot more people. But the story that's really underreported is accountability in the sense of recognition and validation for these survivors. In 1996, Maria Farmer, she is known as one of the first Epstein survivors, the first to go to the FBI and say, I was sexually abused by this man. In 1996, she reported her case to the FBI. For 30 years, no one listened to her, and instead they called her a liar. FBI officials called her a liar. Administrations of both parties called her a liar. The media brushed her aside. And then she was proven to be not a liar when the files were released. That's number one. Same thing with Virginia Giuffre with the famous picture with Andrew and Ghislaine Maxwell in 2001. That picture Andrew claimed was fake, was digitally edited. And then we have an email from the file showing Ghislaine Maxwell discussing that very image as though it was 100% real. So that story really is being underreported. The fact that these survivors aren't being validated enough. And you're already seeing many GOP officials trying to undermine the credibility of the survivors, because you'll see this talking point, and Vance went on Rogan and started pushing it, where they say, oh, well, it's very difficult to draw the line between who's a survivor and who's a co-conspirator. And if you've ever looked at human trafficking cases and sex trafficking cases, oftentimes that line is blurred because survivors and victims of sexual abuse and human trafficking cases are often forced to also solicit others into the scheme. And so they turn into these kind of pseudo co-conspirators. They're not co-conspirators, but if you don't know anything about sex trafficking schemes, you wouldn't know. And so they're pushing this narrative to try to undermine the credibility of many of the survivors, and it's gross to say the least.
What did you make of that appearance on Rogan? Because clearly there was the the kind of effort by Vance to downplay the severity of what they were doing with the cover up. I know that clip went really viral of him saying, oh, if you want to say that we kind of flubbed the messaging, then guilty there, trying to make it seem that this was a PR issue or maybe a comms issue rather than a legal one. But other topics, of course, were discussed in its totality. Like, what was your big takeaway from that appearance? And especially in this moment right now, when a lot of people are talking about whether or not JD Vance is leaking out of the White House, if there's a little bit of a fight between him and Trump, what was your takeaway?
My biggest takeaway in all of this, and it's not just the Rogan interview, it's just the way Vance has been acting lately, is that he's already running for president, and Trump has kind of given him the go-ahead to do so. None of this would be happening if Trump said, JD, you can't go on Joe Rogan. He wouldn't be on Joe Rogan today if the White House shut it down. It's very telling that JD Vance is not in these meetings anymore. For example, the Iraqi prime minister was in the Oval Office this week. Vance was nowhere to be found. He's no longer in these meetings. He's no longer with the president on a day-to-day basis like we saw at the beginning of the administration. He's running for president. He just hasn't officially announced it yet. And I think Trump is giving him kind of the leash to do that and to kind of see whether or not Vance is the successor in the MAGA movement.
Do you think that's because Trump wants to figure that out now, or maybe he's just not as cognizant of what's happening around him? Because there's certainly less that Trump day to day has as a grasp on, given the very severe cognitive decline that we see every day. But which of those two options do you think is more likely kind of for the Vance testing out period?
Well, if we know anything about Trump, it's that Trump likes to pick a winner. And what he does is he's kind of like these prediction markets. He'll endorse a candidate right before their declared victory, right? Like it's 8:59 p.m., clock strikes 9 p.m., election results are about to come out, and Trump's like, I'm going to endorse this guy. He has my full and total endorsement. Same thing happening here with Vance and Rubio. He's giving Vance kind of the leash, in my opinion. He wants to see how he does with Republican voters. He wants to see how he polls. And then come 2027, he's going to jump in and say, no. Actually, I think Rubio's better or Vance is better for whatever reason when he sees where the polls are at. I really think this is just him kind of letting them test it out.
And it's interesting, given that the money has kind of started to fall behind, at least publicly, Rubio a little bit. Of course, Vance still has the backing of big tech, the people who are operating and suppressing our algorithms all the time. We talk about, like, friends of the show, friends of you and I's, Brian Tyler Cohen, David Pakman, who are being targeted as media offenders by the White House. I'm sure you're going to be getting that title soon. We're working for it every single day over here. But how have you encountered fights with, and you're on every platform, with the algorithms themselves in terms of, like, what are the topics that you notice are not getting as much reach because of individual social media algorithms?
Yeah, I mean, Epstein's at the top of the list, right?
Yeah,
the algorithms hate Epstein, especially TikTok. They hate anything about Epstein. Also, gun violence. Surprisingly, algorithms don't like gun violence, and I get why. I mean, they don't want you talking about violence and firearms and all that, but it is news and it needs to be reported. But I think generally, from just a macro lens, politics, right? Yeah. Political news is often suppressed across social platforms. And you see it every day, because I could be reporting on Taco Bell causing explosive diarrhea, getting 10 million views on a video, or I could be talking about a worldwide travel alert just issued by the State Department and get maybe a few 100,000 views. And so you really see the difference in non-political news versus political news.
So I don't want to dox you, but I know you well enough to know that you were just out in LA and you got Taco Bell. We're going to take a little pivot away from the real news here. How can you have any self-respect if you are in Los Angeles and you're eating Taco Bell? What was going on there, Aaron? What are we doing?
Okay, couple things. Number one, I was told
there's a couple things.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, I was told I had to get real, authentic Mexican food when I was out in LA, so I made it a point to do that, and I went and I got nacho fries, which is real and authentic. And then number two, I mean, boots on the ground journalism. I think there are a lot of people on the internet who think that I'm just an aggregate and a mouthpiece, but I wanted to show that I actually go on the ground and test things out myself and let people know really what is happening in this world. So I took a trip to Taco Bell.
Did the order sit fine? I don't want to get too graphic, but were you good after?
As Gloria Gaynor said, I survived, or I will survive. I have survived.
Did you triumph? Did you triumph over the Taco Bell as well?
Build me an arch in Washington, D.C.
I think we should give you a monument. Well, you're talking about the news that that's being reported, that's being suppressed, that isn't. Obviously, we are learning more about the casualties of Donald Trump's war hours and a day after they actually happened. Of course, things take time to verify. I'm not saying that things are always reported right away. But there has kind of been this pattern, at least with Pete Hegseth, of trying to downplay the severity of injuries sustained by service members in the Middle East. How can you, and to what extent do you? Obviously, you're someone who's reporting 50 to 100 pieces of news, it seems, a day. How do you trust and decipher whether or not you want to believe anything that comes out of this White House?
Well, you look to the facts. I mean, at the end of the day, and for example, this morning or this afternoon, 2 more service members were killed. This weekend, 2 more service members were killed in Jordan after an Iranian strike on a U.S. base. And before CENTCOM actually put out that tweet announcing 2 service members had been killed, a family member of a service member at that Jordanian base, or the U.S. base in Jordan, messaged me privately and said, "Hey, it's bad." Mm-hmm. People literally, the message I got was, quote, "My child saw other people on fire after the strikes." And so I knew something was coming. And so that's how I was able to confirm. I think that there are more people dead or more people severely injured than the United States military is letting on after that strike. We'll have to see ultimately, and that's just based on what I hear. So when I look to what people are telling me behind the scenes, I look to what the U.S. government is saying publicly. I always will say in war, I think it's important that we take anything that any government says with a grain of salt. And when Iran says we blew up a U.S. base, I take it with a very big grain of salt. When the United States says we blew up all of Tehran and it's completely obliterated, I take it with a grain of salt. Propaganda is a real thing in war, and both sides do it. And the same thing with casualties. The last thing Pete Hegseth, and I understand this from a war perspective, the last thing the United States government wants is to give the Iranians something to cheer on. And so they're going to try to minimize and limit how much reporting on casualties there are on the American side as much as possible, which is why I think it's so critical that we have so many great journalists in the national security space who are still digging into this and still uncovering a lot of this, even after they were all kicked out of the Pentagon press corps.
Yeah, I think that we have completely forgotten, as we have with so many stories, the fact that Hegseth was threatening and driving actual journalists out.
Yes.
And I want to end on one more question of journalism, because I hate to admit this because we're friends, and so I like to give you shit every once in a while. But some have called you the Walter Cronkite of our generation. I would never say that, again, because we're friends, and I refuse to. I do compliment you, I think, as much as I possibly can. But there was a bit of a dispute with a couple of different media outlets, of course, on Thursday, over whether or not Donald Trump's address, what was going to be countless lies about fraudulent, stolen elections, is something that should have been aired. Where did you come down there?
Yeah, so I actually believe that they should be aired. And when I reported on it, I didn't air his exact remarks, but I quoted him directly.
Yeah.
And so if I'm a major media outlet, the reason why I say it should be aired is because I really think it's important for the public to see how deranged the president is in this moment.
And not forget it, yeah.
Right? Because I think when there is a deep distrust in media, and I think it's very different of me saying what Trump said or Caitlin Collins saying what Trump said versus listening to him say it himself. That's number one. But I do also think they should air it with the caveat as I would run a real-time fact checker as he's speaking. That's what I would have done. And I don't think any media company did that. So yeah, and then it also kind of deflates the pushback that media companies will get of like, oh, they're trying to censor him. Like, we can't censor the president. But then it gets difficult because there is reporting. I don't know if you saw that he plans on doing these monthly now, or like every few weeks. These Oval Office addresses to the nation. And at a point, it's like, are you just going to air every campaign rally? I don't think you should. But yeah.
But you're right about, and this is what I went back and forth on, because I kind of considered streaming it live on my show. And then I thought, like, I'm going to respond to the clips that matter anyways. But I think there is a balance between, should you stream it live and kind of show the full derangement? Should you give them the full 27 minutes? You should at least talk about it. I found it very telling that Fox gave it 5 minutes of coverage and then moved on. Fox and Friends the next morning, there's a 3-hour show. They talked about it 0 times. They talked about it 0 times.
Well, they're afraid to get sued. That's
what I said on my show, is that the fact that Fox couldn't comment on it should have been a story in and of itself. Because if they're so afraid of what Donald Trump is saying, because they're one of the few people who have faced consequences due to Donald Trump's election fraud claims, that tells you everything that you need to know. You just recently launched, speaking of Fox, and let us close here, a show with, and you've been doing a show, but you launched the full show with our good friend Jessica Tarlov. How's it been hanging out with the only good Fox host?
Jessica's great. Huge fan of Jessica Tarlov. And this is me being a good co-host. You should go buy her book. I Disagree. It's on.
I was going to plug it. Why are you taking the plug away from me? This is what I'm supposed to do. It's a Sunday show.
It's a great
breaking
book.
News over here. Aaron,
Make sure your editors need to put the book on the screen right now.
We're going to do a big QR code. When are you coming out with a book? Or are you too busy?
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Whoa. breaking news coming. Aaron, I cannot keep you for more than 20 minutes because you've got news to break. But for those who don't know, and Aaron and I have been friends for a while, and we've done a little bit of content here and there. But it's always good to see you and have you join me on the show, man. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. This was great.
Always fantastic being joined by my friend and friend of the show, Aaron Parnas. And I got to say, we're close because I am surprised anyone is able to get 20 uninterrupted minutes out of Aaron in which he is not, bursting into a breaking news video for TikTok and Instagram. But Aaron is the best. Always appreciate him helping out, joining the show, breaking the news. But I got some news to break. Aaron, I'm going to steal your forte here for a second because as anyone who watches this show knows, we got an award to hand out every week. And it's not just breaking news because someone has won it. It is breaking news because someone has won the Idiot of the Week award for a second time. And this is pretty incredible. But when you hear who it is, you will not be surprised. Pete Hegseth, come on down. You are the first ever 2-time winner of the Idiot of the Week. Yes, Pete Hegseth, a man best known for accidentally texting the Yemen bombing plans to a journalist in a group chat, someone who struggled to lift a warm-up set of weights, which actually turned out to be fake. And now, Pete, you're the Idiot of the Week for personally deciding that the solution to a military that he can't keep staffed or healthy is to keep everyone jacked on steroids. I wish I was joking. Pete Hegseth, or should I say PED Seth, just rolled out a new Pentagon program requiring annual testosterone screening for every single member over 30, but open to any service member of any age. And if you decide that you want higher T levels, I cannot believe I actually have to say that phrase, then the government will pay for testosterone replacement therapy. These are the same people, by the way, the guys saying everyone, every age, any style, any physique, come get your testosterone checked. These are the same guys who are against Medicare for all, making sure that any person can have a checkup on their actual medical needs. It is all idiotic. You don't actually need a low testosterone, though, to get testosterone, according to Pete. It's one of the stupidest parts of this program. All you need are low testosterone symptoms, and symptoms can just be something like the fact that you're tired or unmotivated. You have low libido, which is also just the symptoms of having a job and living during the Trump era. So what Hegseth actually built here, and this is wild because this is the proper description, is a taxpayer-funded, DOD-branded hormone replacement therapy for basically anyone who wants it. And of course, this comes at the same time that they're waging a war on trans people, ripping away their access to hormone therapy, calling it dangerous, calling it a mental illness, calling it a threat to the force, before turning around and handing free testosterone to any guy who's a little sleepy. Pete, my man, hormone therapy is either medicine or it isn't. You don't get to build a whole political movement out of hating it and using it. An entire generation of soldiers already dealing with a performance-enhancing drug and peptide epidemic among guys in their 20s, and now the Secretary of War, he's giving his blessing to add steroids to the pile. So instead of make America healthy again, we get make America jacked, balding, acne-covered, and infertile again. Any army of guys that Pete Hegseth puts together with 50 extra pounds of muscle, they will mostly use it to sit in a tent and fly a drone so they can keep losing wars in Donald Trump's name. I don't know if you can bench more, it'll open the Strait of Hormuz, because so far, nothing has worked out. I don't think it's a coincidence that the guy that's pushing this is also the same guy who has spent his entire public career, and really this year, publicly humiliating himself in the gym on camera. Pete's been struggling through a bench press with his own teenage son spotting him, getting dragged by actual trainers, calling it an injury risk. One workout video of Pete got so viral for how weak he looked that he might have had a humiliation kink. Pete is not an athlete. He's a Fox News host who brought a bunch of tactical gear and got security clearance. That's it. Pete Hegseth, you are the idiot of the week. You and RFK Jr. can inject yourself with whatever you want, but just please leave the military and the rest of the population out of it. I am so tired of these guys, and that is why we got to call them out, and that is why we are always going to be doing that on this show. And we had another great one this week. Thank you to Ben Meiselas. Thank you to Congresswoman Sarah McBride. Thank you to the friend of the show, Aaron Parnas. And thank you so much to all of you who have been tuning in for the 8th straight, maybe it's the 9th straight week of On Sunday. The show has only been growing every single week, and it is because of you. It is also because of the Meidas Mighty and the Meidas crew that puts it together. Once again, Ben, but also Brett and Jordy. So shout out to you guys. But we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep bringing the truth. We're going to call out the idiots. We're going to point out the lies, whether they come from Donald Trump, his cabinet, Congress, or of course the mainstream media. And as you know, we are going to be doing it right here every single week. It's going to be me. It's going to be you. And I hope to see y'all again soon. Same time, same place. And as always, on Sunday.